Picture this. A mother holds her dying 5-year-old son in her arms, his oxygen levels dropping, his lips turning blue. She calls her husband once, twice, 17 times. He never answers, because 2 miles away in a luxury hotel suite, her husband is sleeping peacefully, wrapped around another woman. When his phone lights up with her name, his mistress picks it up. She looks at the screen, she smiles, and she silences the call. She worries too much, he mumbles. The kid is always sick. It will pass. But the kid did not pass through. The kid passed away. And here is the part that will make your blood boil. The money for the treatment that could have saved that little boy, it existed. $200,000, hidden in offshore accounts. Because her husband decided his dying son was a lost cause. But what he did not know, he just made the biggest mistake of his life. Because this mother, she was about to become his worst nightmare. Stay until the end. Because revenge has never tasted this sweet. The sound of a flat line is something you never forget. It is a single, merciless tone that splits your life into two parts. Before and after. Everything you thought you knew, everything you believed about love and trust and family, gets divided by that sound into the person you used to be and the person you are forced to become. December 14th, 11:47 at night. A small apartment in Brooklyn, downsized after 2 years of medical bills that insurance barely touched. Elena Morrison, Lena to everyone who loved her, held her 5-year-old son against her chest. His breathing was shallow. Each inhale came as a fragile rasp that sent panic shooting through her veins. His small body felt lighter than it should, as if the sickness had been stealing pieces of him ounce by ounce, day by day, while she watched helplessly. The small digital monitor on the nightstand flickered. Oxygen levels dropping, 92, 90. 88. Lena pressed her cheek to his forehead. Burning, too hot, too fast. Ethan, baby, stay with me. Mommy is right here. Mommy is not going anywhere. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her phone and dialed her husband. Again. Brad should have been home hours ago. He had promised. No late meetings, no drinks with clients, no excuses. He had looked her in the eyes that morning, kissed her forehead, and said the words she so desperately needed to hear. I will be home early tonight, I promise. The call went straight to voicemail. Brad, please, it is Ethan. He cannot breathe right. I need you. Please pick up. Her voice cracked, swallowed by walls that had witnessed far too many lonely nights, too many dinners eaten alone, too many bedtime stories read by only one parent, too many nights holding Ethan through his coughing fits, while Brad claimed to be stuck in meetings that never seemed to end. She dialed again. Voicemail again. Voicemail again. Voicemail. Lena looked down at her son's face. His eyes were closed. His lips had taken on a bluish tint that made her stomach drop. She thought about 3 months ago, at his 5th birthday party, the small gathering they could barely afford after the latest round of hospital bills. Ethan blowing out his birthday candles. Making a wish with his eyes squeezed tight. Brad standing in the corner, checking his phone the entire time. Not even pretending to pay attention to the most important moment of their son's year. Her boy had tugged at her sleeve afterward, asking in that small voice that still haunted her dreams. Mommy, is Daddy mad at me? No, baby, Daddy is just busy saving the world. But Daddy was not saving the world tonight. Lena dialed Brad one more time. The 17th call, she counted every single one. Voicemail. 2 miles away inside a luxurious suite at the St. Regis Hotel, Brad Morrison slept peacefully. The room glowed with soft golden light from crystal lamps that cost more than Lena's monthly grocery budget. A half-finished bottle of Macallan whiskey, the 18-year reserve that Brad insisted on drinking despite their supposed financial struggles, sat on the marble table beside 2 empty champagne flutes. Designer clothes lay scattered across the floor in a trail that told a story. A silk tie draped over a chair, a dress shirt crumpled near the bathroom door, high heels kicked off carelessly by the bed. Brad lay tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets, his arm wrapped around a woman who was not his wife. Sloane Whitmore, 28 years old, blonde hair spread across the pillow like spilled honey. His executive assistant for the past 3 years, his mistress for the past 18 months. Sloane stirred when Brad's phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up the darkness with an insistent glow. She reached across his bare chest, her manicured nails catching the light, and saw the name flash across the screen. Lena, again. Sloane smiled. Not a kind smile. The smile of a woman who had already won a competition that Lena did not even know she was losing. She is calling again. Sloane murmured, her voice thick with sleep and satisfaction. Brad did not even open his eyes. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. She worries too much. The kid is always sick. It will pass. He said it so casually, so dismissively. As if his 5-year-old son's struggle to breathe was nothing more than an inconvenience. A minor interruption in his carefully constructed double life. Sloane silenced the phone and set it face down on the nightstand. You should turn it off completely. She will just keep calling. Brad mumbled something that might have been agreement. Within seconds, he was asleep again. Back in Brooklyn, Lena watched the monitor drop to 85, then 82, then 79. She stopped waiting for Brad to answer. Her fingers dialed 911 with a steadiness that surprised her. Some part of her brain had taken over, the part that knew panicking would not save her son. The part that had been trained by 2 years of emergency room visits and midnight scares and learning to stay calm when every cell in her body screamed for her to fall apart. 911, what is your emergency? My son cannot breathe. He has a congenital heart defect. His oxygen levels are dropping. Please hurry. Please. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. 7 minutes that felt like 7 hours. 7 minutes of watching the numbers fall. 80, 77, 74. 7 minutes of holding Ethan's small hand and praying to a God she was not sure she believed in anymore. Please, please, please. The paramedics burst through the door like angels in navy blue uniforms. They moved with practiced efficiency, speaking in calm voices that did nothing to slow Lena's racing heart. One of them, a woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, guided Lena toward the door. You can ride with us, ma'am. We are going to take good care of him. Lena climbed into the ambulance, held Ethan's hand as paramedics worked around her. Monitors beeped. Oxygen masks hissed. Voices called out numbers and abbreviations she did not understand. The sirens screamed through empty streets. Red and blue lights sliced across the frozen city, painting the buildings in emergency colors. Snow had begun to fall, soft and silent, as if the world was trying to muffle the chaos. Lena kissed her son's knuckles, the same knuckles she had kissed 1,000 times before. When he scraped his knee, learning to ride a tricycle, when he woke up scared from nightmares, when he came out of surgery, groggy and confused but alive. Please, sweetheart, please stay. Do not leave me. Ethan's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. He looked at her with those beautiful brown eyes, the same eyes as her father, and whispered something so soft she almost missed it. Mommy, where is Daddy? Lena's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Daddy is coming, baby. Daddy is coming soon. It was the last lie she would ever tell her son. By the time they reached the hospital, something had already shifted. Lena felt it in her bones before anyone spoke. A heaviness in the air, a wrongness that pressed against her chest like a physical weight. The doctors rushed Ethan through the emergency room doors. Machines beeped. Voices shouted commands. Someone called for a crash cart. Someone else yelled about losing the pulse. A nurse, young and trembling, guided Lena back as her legs buckled beneath her. Ma'am, you need to let them work. Ma'am, please. Lena stood frozen outside the glass doors, watching, praying, bargaining with every higher power she could think of. Take anything. Take everything. Just let him live. The monitor flatlined, that single merciless tone, louder than any storm, longer than any silence, a sound that would echo in her nightmares for the rest of her life. She watched through the glass as doctors worked frantically over her son's small body. Chest compressions, defibrillator paddles, injections pushed through IV lines. Nothing worked. Her world shattered in one moment. When the doctor emerged, Lena already knew. She saw it in the way he could not meet her eyes. She heard it in the pause before he spoke. She felt it in the way the air seemed to thicken around her, making each breath a struggle. I am so sorry, Mrs. Morrison. We did everything we could. The words washed over her like water over stone. She understood them. She knew what they meant, but some part of her brain refused to process them. No, Mrs. Morrison. No. He was fine this morning. He was fine. He ate breakfast. He laughed at cartoons. He asked me to read him a story about dinosaurs. The doctor's face crumpled with sympathy. Sometimes with congenital heart conditions, episodes can escalate very quickly. There was nothing you could have done, but there was something someone could have done. The experimental treatment, the one the doctors had recommended 6 months ago, the one that cost $200,000 and was not covered by insurance, the one Brad said they could not afford. Lena did not scream. She did not cry. She simply stopped. A nurse brought her Ethan's stuffed elephant, the gray one with the floppy ears that he had named Trumpet, the one he slept with every night since he was 2 years old, still warm from his hands. Lena clutched it to her chest and sank into a gray plastic chair in the hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed above her like mechanical insects. The antiseptic smell burned her nose. Somewhere down the hall, a baby cried. Life continuing in the midst of death. But Lena felt nothing. Nothing except the elephant's worn fabric against her fingers. Nothing except the weight of 17 unanswered phone calls pressing against her heart. She had called Brad 17 times. 17 times, and now her son was gone. Hours passed, maybe. Lena was not sure. Time had become meaningless. A nurse brought her water that she did not drink. A chaplain offered prayers that she did not hear. Forms were placed in front of her that she signed without reading. But Lena did not know the worst part yet. She did not know that while she held their dying child, while she desperately dialed number after number, Brad had looked at her name on his phone and chosen to ignore it. She did not know that the woman in his bed had silenced her calls with a smirk, as casually as one might dismiss a telemarketer. And she certainly did not know that Brad's betrayal went far deeper than an affair, that her husband had been committing federal crimes for the past 18 months, that he had used her name, her identity, her trust, to build a criminal enterprise that could send her to prison for decades, that the money for Ethan's treatment had existed all along, hidden in offshore accounts while their son slowly died. But she would learn. Soon enough, Lena Morrison would learn everything. And when she did, she would make sure that everyone who failed her son paid the price, starting with the man who had promised to love and protect them both. The footsteps echoed down the hospital corridor just after 2 in the morning. Slow, heavy, deliberate. The kind of footsteps that made people instinctively straighten their posture, that made security guards stand a little taller, that carried the weight of authority earned through decades of service. Lena looked up from her plastic chair. She had been sitting in the same position for hours, clutching Ethan's elephant to her chest, staring at nothing. The hallway had emptied as the night shift settled into routine. Most of the overhead lights had been dimmed. The only sounds were the distant beeping of monitors and the soft squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum. A tall man stood at the end of the corridor, older than she remembered. The lines on his face were deeper now, carved by years of secrets and stress that she could only imagine. His dark hair had turned silver at the temples, distinguished rather than aged. He still stood, ramrod straight, shoulders back, chin up, the posture of a man who had commanded troops in war zones and boardrooms alike. But his presence remained unchanged, unshakable, commanding. The kind of man who could walk into chaos and silence it with one look. The kind of man who made other men nervous just by existing in the same room. Colonel Grant Holden, retired military intelligence, current owner of Holden Security, one of the most respected private investigation firms on the East Coast. A man who had spent 30 years learning secrets that governments tried to bury. Her father, the man she had not spoken to in 5 years. Dad. The word came out broken. A child's word. The word of a daughter who had once believed her father could fix anything before she grew up and learned that some things were beyond fixing. She had not spoken to him since she chose Brad over her family, since Brad convinced her that Grant was controlling and toxic, that she needed to cut ties if she wanted a fresh start, if she wanted their marriage to work. Your father never approved of me, Brad had said. So many times it became a mantra. He is trying to control you. He will never let you be happy. And Lena had believed him. She had chosen the man who promised her love over the man who had actually loved her since the moment she was born. She had traded 30 years of unconditional support for a charming smile and beautiful lies. Grant crossed the distance between them without a word. His face was stone, but his eyes, those steel blue eyes that Lena had inherited, were liquid with grief. He gathered her into his arms, and for the first time since Ethan stopped breathing, Lena felt something crack open inside her chest. She buried her face against his coat. The familiar smell of his aftershave hit her like a wave of memory. Birthday parties and Christmas mornings, him teaching her to ride a bike, walking her down the aisle at her wedding, even though he had never approved of the groom. She sobbed, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere she had not known existed. "I came as soon as I heard," Grant said quietly. His voice was rough with emotion he was trying to control. "I am so sorry, sweetheart. So damn sorry." She clung to him like he was the last solid thing in a world made entirely of smoke. "How did you know?" Grant exhaled slowly. His hand stroked her hair, the way he used to when she was a little girl waking from nightmares. "The hospital called your emergency contact number, the one you left years ago." He paused. His voice dropped even lower. "I never changed it." Lena's throat tightened. She had forgotten that detail. Forgotten that even after years of silence, years of unanswered birthday cards and ignored Christmas calls, her father had kept her number active, had kept watching over her from a distance she never realized existed. All those years she thought he had given up on her. He never had. The guilt hit her like a physical blow. All those times she had defended Brad to her empty apartment, convincing herself she had made the right choice. All those nights she had looked at her phone, thought about calling her father, and talked herself out of it because Brad would be upset. "Dad." She pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes. Her face was streaked with tears and snot. Her hair was tangled. Her clothes were wrinkled and stained with things she did not want to think about. She looked destroyed, but Grant looked at her like she was still the most precious thing in his world. "Ethan is gone." She said it quietly, as if saying it too loud might shatter the building around them, might make it real in a way it was not yet. Grant's jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. His arms tightened around her. Not just grief in his expression now. Something else. Something colder. Something that made her think of documentary footage she had seen of predators spotting prey. Anger. Controlled, calculated, dangerous anger. "Where is Brad?" Lena shook her head. The tears started again. He did not come. He did not answer. "I called him 17 times. 17 times, Dad. While our son was dying in my arms, I called him 17 times and he did not answer once." Grant's entire body went still. The kind of stillness that preceded violence. "He was out somewhere, I do not know where, some work thing," he said this morning. "He did not even call back. He still has not called. Our son is dead and my husband has not called me." Grant pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. The soldier in him had surfaced. The protector. The man who had spent decades navigating danger, betrayal, and secrets darker than his daughter could imagine. "Your husband left you alone the night your son died?" Lena nodded, tears streaming down her face, dripping onto Ethan's elephant. "He did not care, Dad. He never cared. Not about Ethan, not really. He just pretended, and I was too stupid to see it. I was too desperate to believe the lie." She thought about all the times Brad had sighed when Ethan needed another doctor's appointment, all the times he had complained about the bills, all the times he had looked at their son not with love, but with something closer to resentment. She had made excuses, told herself he was stressed, told herself he showed love differently, told herself that someday, when Ethan was older and healthier, they would bond properly. Someday would never come now. Grant stood slowly, his shoulders squared. His expression hardened into something that looked carved from granite. The transformation was remarkable to watch. One moment he was a grieving grandfather. The next he was something else entirely, something dangerous. "Then he will care," Grant said. His voice was quiet, controlled, absolutely certain. "I will make sure of it." "Sure." Lena blinked through tears. "What do you mean?" Grant did not answer directly. Instead, he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. The touch was grounding, reassuring. The touch of a man who had handled crises for a living. "You need rest, sweetheart. I will take you home." get you cleaned up, make sure you eat something. I cannot eat, I cannot. You will try. Grant's voice was firm but kind. For Ethan, because he would want his mother to take care of herself. The words hit her like a blow. Ethan, her baby, her reason for breathing for the past 5 years. Grant continued, his voice dropping to something that sounded almost like a promise. Tomorrow we start dealing with the people who failed you. Lena looked up at him. People? Grant's eyes swept down the hallway as if he could already see the path ahead. Luxury hotel suites, financial ledgers, hidden offshore accounts, private investigators' reports, court documents. There is more to this than you know, he said. And Brad is not the only one who is going to answer for it. Lena stared at her father, confused and shaken. She did not understand what he meant, did not understand the look in his eyes that suggested he already knew things she had not even begun to suspect. Grant reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. A photograph. He handed it to her wordlessly. Lena looked at it. Her blood froze. Brad, walking into a hotel, his arm around a blonde woman, looking at her with the kind of adoration he had not shown Lena in years. The timestamp on the photograph was from 6 months ago. Dad, she breathed, what is this? Grant's eyes hardened into something that looked like justice. It is the first piece of evidence. Out of many. He paused. I have been watching your husband for 2 years, sweetheart. Waiting for you to see what I saw. Praying you would come to me before things got this bad. 2 years? Grant nodded slowly. I hired investigators the month after you cut me off. Not to interfere, just to make sure you were safe. And what they found, he stopped. Took a breath. What they found made me very glad I never stopped watching. Lena clutched the photograph with trembling hands. The woman in the picture. Blonde hair, designer clothes, looking at Brad like he hung the moon. The same woman Brad had told her 1,000 times was just his assistant. Just Sloane. Nothing to worry about. You are being paranoid. But Lena had not been paranoid. She had been right. And her father had known. For 2 years, her father had known her husband was a liar and a cheat. And he had waited for her to see it herself. Why did you not tell me? Grant's face softened with something that looked like old pain. Would you have believed me? Lena thought about that, about how she had felt 2 years ago, still in love with Brad, still believing his explanations, still making excuses for every red flag that appeared. No, she admitted quietly, I would have said you were trying to control me, just like he told me you would. Grant nodded. So I waited. I gathered evidence, and I prayed that one day you would be ready to see the truth. He reached into his coat again. This time he pulled out a thick envelope. This is everything, he said. Every piece of evidence my investigators have collected, every photograph, every transaction, every lie. He placed it in her lap. But this is not just about the affair, sweetheart. This is about crimes. Federal crimes. Crimes that Brad has been committing using your name. Lena's head was spinning. Too much information. Too much betrayal. Too much to process on a night when she had already lost everything. I do not understand. You will. Grant's voice was gentle but firm. Tomorrow, tonight, you grieve. You rest. You let yourself be taken care of for once. He helped her to her feet, steadied her when she swayed. But I promise you this, he continued. By the time I am finished with Brad Morrison, he is going to wish he had answered his phone. And Lena had no idea just how deep her husband's betrayal truly went, or how spectacularly her father was going to make him pay. 3 a.m, Lena's apartment building, the kind of building where buzzers did not always work, and the elevator groaned like an elderly relative climbing stairs. Grant had insisted on driving her home himself. His black SUV was warm and quiet, a cocoon of safety in a world that had suddenly become very unsafe. Lena sat in the passenger seat, clutching the envelope of evidence in one hand and Ethan's elephant in the other. She could not bring herself to look at the photographs again. Not yet. One glimpse had been enough to confirm what some part of her had always known, but refused to acknowledge. Her marriage was a lie. Her husband was a stranger. Everything she had sacrificed, the relationship with her father, her career as a corporate lawyer, her own identity, she had sacrificed it all for nothing. The elevator groaned as it climbed to the 6th floor. Grant stood beside her in the narrow car, his presence solid and reassuring. He had not spoken much during the drive, giving her space to process, but his hand had found hers in the darkness, squeezing gently, reminding her that she was not alone. The hallway smelled like old carpet and somebody's dinner from hours ago. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. Not for the first time, Lena felt ashamed of how far she had fallen. 3 years ago, she and Brad had lived in a beautiful apartment in Manhattan. 2 bedrooms, city views, a doorman who knew their names. Then Ethan's diagnosis came, and the medical bills started piling up, and Brad insisted they needed to downsize. "We will save money," he had said. Put it toward his treatment. But Lena was beginning to wonder where that money had actually gone. She fumbled for her keys. Her hands trembled so badly she dropped them twice. Grant picked them up, unlocked the door, and stopped cold. The apartment lights were on. There was a faint smell of cologne, strong, sharp, expensive. The kind Brad always wore, even though Lena had pointed out years ago that they could not afford $100 bottles of scent when they were struggling to pay for their son's medications. Brad was home. He stood in the kitchen, drinking bottled water and scrolling through his phone as if it were any other night. His hair was slightly mussed. His shirt was wrinkled. His jaw was rough with stubble. He was wearing the same clothes he had left in that morning. The picture of a man who had slept comfortably somewhere that was not home. He looked up lazily when they entered. His expression shifted from annoyance to mild curiosity as he registered Grant's presence. Not alarm. Alarm. Not guilt. Just the vague irritation of someone whose evening had been interrupted. "There you are," he took a sip of water. "I was starting to worry." The casualness of it hit Lena like a slap. He was starting to worry. After 17 missed calls, after hours of silence, after their son died in a hospital room while he was tangled in sheets with another woman, he was starting to worry. Lena stared at him, unable to form words, unable to reconcile the man she had married with the stranger standing in her kitchen. Grant stood beside her. His expression was unreadable, but his body had shifted into something that Lena recognized from her childhood. The stance of a man preparing for confrontation. Weight balanced, shoulders square, eyes tracking every movement. Brad's gaze flicked to the older man, a flash of recognition, quickly replaced by dismissal. "And you?" Brad raised an eyebrow. "Did not know we were hosting guests. It has been, what, 5 years?" Grant said nothing. His silence was more threatening than any words could have been. Lena swallowed hard. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Brad. She forced the name out, forced herself to look at the face she had loved for 8 years, Ethan. Her voice cracked on her son's name. The word felt foreign in her mouth, like speaking about a dream she had just woken from. He did not make it. For a moment, nothing in Brad's expression changed. Lena watched him carefully, looking for grief, looking for shock, looking for anything that might suggest he felt something, anything about the death of his only child. There was nothing. Not grief, not shock, not even confusion. Just a slight tightening around his eyes that might have been annoyance at having his evening disrupted. He simply sighed. "I figured the kid was always sick." The words hung in the air like poison. Grant moved so fast Lena barely saw it happen. One moment he was standing beside her. The next, he was directly in Brad's space, close enough that Brad had to lean back against the counter. "Watch your mouth." Grant's voice was quiet, controlled, and more frightening than any shout could have been. Brad blinked, surprised by the older man's intensity. He had always dismissed Grant as harmless, a control freak with too much time on his hands, someone to be tolerated at holidays and ignored the rest of the year. He was beginning to realize he had made a serious miscalculation. "Excuse me? Show some respect. Your son is dead." Brad's jaw tightened, not with sorrow, not with guilt, with irritation. The irritation of a man who was being inconvenienced by something as trivial as his child's death. "Look, I know you are upset, but yelling at me is not going to bring him back." He looked past Grant to Lena, his voice taking on the patronizing tone she had heard 1,000 times before. "And honestly, Lena, you always overreact about everything. The drama is exhausting." Something inside Lena cracked, not like glass, like stone, a breaking so deep it echoed through her bones, a breaking that felt less like destruction and more like liberation. For years, she had accepted his dismissals, his gaslighting, his constant implications that her feelings were too much, her concerns were overblown. Her love for their son was obsessive. She had shrunk herself to fit into the tiny box he allowed her no more. Where were you? Her voice was quiet, dangerous, a voice she did not recognize as her own. Your phone was off. You did not call back. You were not there. Brad shrugged, taking another drink of his water, as if they were discussing the weather. I told you I had a work thing. Grant's voice cut through the room like a blade. You were at the St. Regis, Suite 1904. Brad froze, just for a fraction of a second, too fast for most people to notice, but not fast enough to escape the eyes of a man who had spent 30 years interrogating spies and criminals. Grant saw it, Lena saw it, and Brad saw them seeing it. He recovered quickly, forcing a scoff that did not quite reach his eyes. You have been spying on me? Grant did not answer. He did not need to. The truth had already revealed itself in Brad's reaction. The flicker of panic, the darting eyes, the slight tremor in his hand as he set down the water bottle. Lena stared at her husband. Her chest tightened until she could barely breathe. You left our son dying so you could be with her. It was not a question. It was an accusation, a conviction, a death sentence for whatever remained of their marriage. Brad slammed the bottle onto the counter. I am not doing this right now. I have had a long night. We will talk tomorrow when you are calm. He started walking toward the bedroom, dismissing her, again, the way he had dismissed her for years. Grant's voice thundered through the apartment. You will not make it to tomorrow. Brad turned slowly. The irritation in his face had shifted to something else, something that looked almost like fear. What the hell does that mean? It means your life is about to fall apart. Grant stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow filled the entire room. And I am going to be the one who tears it down, brick by brick. Brad stared at him, then at Lena, then back at Grant. This is insane. You are both insane, he pointed at Lena. Your father has poisoned you against me from the beginning. This is exactly what he wanted. No. Lena's voice cut through his rant. This is what you created. With your lies, with your choices, with your complete and total inability to be a husband or a father. She stepped forward, past Grant, until she was face to face with the man she had once loved more than anything. Get out. Brad laughed, a nervous, ugly sound. This is my apartment. It is in my name. Lena's voice was steady now, cold, certain. You put it in my name, along with everything else. You wanted me to be the one holding the bag when it all fell apart. She did not understand yet exactly what that meant. But Grant had shown her enough tonight to know that Brad had been planning something, using her, setting her up. The realization hardened something inside her. Get out, she repeated. Now, Brad looked at her for a long moment, searching for the woman who had always backed down, always apologized, always smoothed things over to keep the peace. That woman was dead. She had died in a hospital hallway, clutching a stuffed elephant, while her husband slept in another woman's arms. Brad grabbed his jacket from the counter, shoved past her toward the door. Fine, I will stay at a hotel until you calm down. But this is not over, Lena. You do not get to throw away 8 years because your father filled your head with paranoid fantasies. The door slammed behind him, and for the first time in her marriage, Lena did not feel the urge to run after him, to apologize, to make things right. She felt relief. Grant placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Are you okay? No. Lena shook her head, tears streaming down her face. But I will be. She turned to face her father, the man she had abandoned for a lie. Dad, I am so sorry. For everything. For choosing him over you. For believing his lies. For 5 years of silence. Grant pulled her into another hug. His voice was thick with emotion. You have nothing to apologize for, sweetheart. You were manipulated by a professional liar. It happens to the best of us. He pulled back, wiped a tear from her cheek. But now you know the truth, and now we make him pay. Lena looked at the envelope of evidence still clutched in her hand. Tell me everything. Grant nodded slowly. Tomorrow. Tonight you need to sleep. You need to grieve. You need to say goodbye to your son in the way he deserved. He guided her toward the couch, made her sit down, covered her with a blanket. "I will be right here," he said. "All night. I am not going anywhere." Lena clutched Ethan's elephant to her chest. The tears came again, silent and endless. But for the first time since the flatline, she did not feel completely alone. Her father was back, and together they were going to destroy the man who had taken everything from her. Dawn came gray and cold over Brooklyn, the kind of morning that felt like the sky itself was grieving. Low clouds, bitter wind, a thin layer of frost on every surface that caught the pale winter light. Lena had not slept. She had drifted in and out of something that resembled sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she heard the flatline, saw Ethan's small face, peaceful in a way it had never been in life, felt the warmth draining from his body as she held him one last time. Grant had kept his promise. He had stayed all night, sitting in the armchair by the window, watching over her like a sentinel. When she woke screaming from nightmares, he was there with water and quiet reassurance. When she cried until she could not breathe, he held her hand and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Around 7 in the morning, a knock came at the door. Lena did not move, could not move. She sat on the couch wrapped in one of Ethan's blankets, the one covered in cartoon dinosaurs that he had insisted on taking everywhere. It still smelled like him. Baby shampoo and chocolate chip cookies and something uniquely Ethan that she knew would fade with time. She was not ready for it to fade. Grant opened the door and stepped aside to let someone in. Meg Carter Davis stood in the hallway. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She held 2 large coffees from the shop they used to go to in college and a bag of bagels that neither of them would eat. Megan. Meg to everyone who loved her. Lena's best friend since freshman year of college, when they had bonded over terrible dining hall food and a shared hatred of their calculus professor. Meg was an emergency room nurse now, a divorced single mom to twin boys, a woman who had seen the worst of humanity during 12-hour shifts and come out the other side with her heart intact. A woman with zero tolerance for nonsense and a capacity for love that seemed to have no limits. She took one look at Lena and set everything down on the nearest surface. "Oh, honey, come here." They held each other for a long time, 2 women who had been through everything together, breakups and makeups, graduations and job losses, the slow erosion of Lena's marriage and Meg's brutal divorce. This was different. This was grief so deep it had no bottom. Meg held her while she cried, stroked her hair, said nothing because there was nothing to say. Sometimes the best gift a friend can give is simply presence, simply being there when the world falls apart. Finally, Meg pulled back. Her eyes were red, but her jaw was set in that determined way Lena recognized from years of friendship. "I'm going to say something, and you can hate me for it later, but I need you to hear it." "What?" Lena's voice was hoarse from crying. "I have been waiting 3 years for you to leave him." The words landed like stones in still water. "Meg!" Lena started to protest, but Meg held up her hand. I know you loved him. I know you wanted to believe. But that man looked at your son like he was an inconvenience." Meg's voice cracked, but she pushed through. "Every time I visited, Brad was either gone or on his phone. Ethan used to ask me why his daddy did not like him." She took a breath, wiped her eyes. "And I had to lie to my hamlalanibo. I had to make up stories about how daddy was busy and daddy loved him very much, because I could not bear to see that look on his face. That confused, heartbroken look of a little boy who just wanted his father to notice him." Lena broke down again. The sobs came from somewhere deep, somewhere she had been keeping locked for years. All the doubts she had pushed aside, all the red flags she had explained away, all the times she had known, deep down, that something was wrong with her marriage. She had ignored it all. For Ethan, because she wanted him to have a father, because she believed that some father was better than no father. She had been so wrong. Meg held her through the storm, and when the boss finally subsided into hiccups, Meg spoke again. "But here is the thing, babe. You survived him. You survived years of gaslighting and emotional neglect and lies." She squeezed Lena's hands. "You are going to bury your son, and you are going to grieve properly, the way he deserves." And then, her eyes hardened into something that looked like justice. "You're going to destroy that man, and I am going to help." Before Lena could respond, Grant cleared his throat. He had been standing quietly by the window, giving them space for their reunion. Now he stepped forward, carrying a thick manila folder that looked like it weighed several pounds. "Lena, I need you to sit down." The tone of his voice made her stomach drop. There was more. Of course there was more. The affair was just the beginning. Grant spread the contents across the kitchen table. Bank statements, corporate filings, transaction records from accounts Lena had never seen before. Photographs of Brad entering and leaving various offices, some of which she recognized and some she did not. Grant explained slowly, carefully, the way you explain something terrible to someone who's already in shock. Brad has been laundering money through shell companies for the past 18 months, moving funds through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, Cyprus. Lena shook her head. The words made no sense. That is impossible. I would have noticed something. Bank statements, credit card bills, something. Grant's voice softened with something that might have been pity. That is the problem, sweetheart. You would not have noticed, because all the accounts are in your name. The room tilted. Lena gripped the edge of the table as the floor seemed to shift beneath her feet. What? He had you sign documents during Ethan's illness. Late at night when you were exhausted from hospital visits, when you trusted him completely and did not have the energy to read the fine print. Grant pulled out a stack of papers, signatures that looked like hers but somehow wrong. Dates she could not remember. He forged your signature on the rest, Grant continued. Used your social security number, your identity, your clean record. The implications crashed over her like a wave. If this comes out the way it stands now, Grant said quietly, you go to prison. Not him. Meg cursed under her breath. A string of words that would have made a sailor blush. That piece of garbage framed her. Grant nodded, effectively yes. He set her up to take the fall for everything. If the FBI comes knocking, all the evidence points to Lena. Brad can claim he was an innocent spouse who had no idea what his wife was doing. Lena stared at the documents. Her name, her supposed signatures. Her entire life weaponized against her by the man who had promised to love and protect her. Something shifted inside her. The grief did not disappear. It was still there, a heavy weight pressing against her chest. But something else rose alongside it. Something cold. Something focused. Something that felt less like despair and more like determination. She picked up the files, read them carefully, the way she used to read legal documents back when she was a corporate attorney, before she gave up her career to take care of Ethan full-time. Brad had thought she would never look at these papers. Had counted on her trust and her exhaustion and her distraction. He had underestimated her. He used my identity. She said the words slowly, letting them sink in. While our son was dying in hospitals, he was using my name to commit federal crimes. Yes. Then I am going to use everything to take him down. But I need to do this right. I need to prove he forged these signatures. I need his own records, his own communications. Something that proves I had nothing to do with this. Grant almost smiled. The first hint of approval she had seen since he walked back into her life. His office is secure, his laptop is encrypted. Lena looked up, a dark determination in her eyes that made even her father pause. But Sloan is not. And I know exactly where she is every Thursday night. Meg's jaw dropped. Wait, are we doing a heist? Lena shook her head. Not a heist, a confrontation. But I am going to need backup. Meg grinned for the first time since she arrived. A fierce, dangerous grin that reminded Lena why they had been friends for 15 years. Girl, I have been waiting for this moment my entire life. Thursday night, the Gilded Vine Wine Bar in Midtown Manhattan. Upscale enough to attract young professionals celebrating promotions and closing deals. Casual enough for after-work drinks with colleagues and friends. The kind of place where women in designer clothes clinked glasses and pretended their lives were as perfect as their Instagram feeds. Sloan Whitmore came here every Thursday with her work friends. Lena had learned this detail months ago, overhearing Brad mention it during a phone call he thought she was not listening to. Make sure you leave early enough to meet the girls at Gilded Vine, he had said. You know how Michelle gets when you are late. At the time, Lena had not thought twice about it. Brad's assistant had a regular girls' night. So what? It was healthy to have friends, healthy to have a life outside of work. Now she understood. Brad knew Sloane's schedule down to the minute because he needed to know when she would be occupied, when he could make excuses, when his two lives could exist without overlapping. Tonight, those lives were about to collide. Lena and Meg arrived at 6:45, secured a table near the back where they could watch the entrance without being immediately visible. Lena wore black, simple, professional, a silk blouse and tailored pants that she had not worn since she stopped practicing law, armor for battle. Meg ordered wine for herself and sparkling water for Lena. You sure you do not want something stronger? Lena shook her head. I need to be clear for this. Every word matters. Meg studied her friend's face. The determination, the cold focus, the complete absence of the self-doubt that had plagued Lena for years. You know, she said slowly, when you texted me the plan, I thought you had lost your mind. Maybe I have. No, Meg shook her head. You have finally found it. You spent 8 years hiding who you really are, trying to be the wife Brad wanted. This? This is the Lena I knew in college. The one who crushed moot court and made senior partners nervous. The one who never backed down from anything. Lena almost smiled, almost. She was not ready to smile yet. She was not sure she would ever be ready again. But she was ready for this. The door opened at 7:15. Sloane walked in with two co-workers, women Lena vaguely recognized from office Christmas parties. They were laughing about something, phones out, recording each other's reactions to whatever joke had just been told. Sloane Whitmore. Blonde hair perfectly styled in waves that probably took an hour to achieve. Designer dress that cost more than Lena's monthly rent. 4-inch heels that clicked against the hardwood floor like an announcement of arrival. Confidence radiating from every step. She was beautiful. Lena had to admit that. The kind of beautiful that made men stupid and women insecure. The kind of beautiful that opened doors and closed deals and made people forgive sins they should never forgive. But beauty built on betrayal had a way of rotting from the inside. And tonight, Lena was going to make sure everyone could see the rot. Sloane and her friends settled at a table near the window. Prime real estate in a place like this. They ordered cocktails from a waitress who clearly knew them by name. Started scrolling through their phones, sharing stories, living the kind of carefree life that Lena had not known in years. Lena watched, waited, remembered. 6 months ago, a Sunday afternoon. Sloane had stopped by their apartment to drop off documents Brad claimed to need urgently for a Monday meeting. She had cooed at Ethan, who was coloring at the kitchen table. He is so precious. Look at those curls. But when Ethan, excited to have a visitor, tried to show her his drawing, Sloane barely glanced at it. Her eyes were already on Brad. Her smile was already shifting into something more intimate. Lena had told herself she was imagining things. Later, while Brad walked Sloane to the door, Lena overheard her on the phone in the hallway. The walls were thin. Sloane's voice carried. I know, but it will not be much longer. The kid is getting worse. Brad says maybe another year, tops. Then we can finally be together for real. Lena had convinced herself she misheard, had told herself there was another explanation, had buried the suspicion under layers of denial because the alternative was too terrible to face. She had not misheard. And now it was time for Sloane to face some terrible truths of her own. Lena stood up from her table. Meg grabbed her hand. You sure about this? Once you confront her, there is no taking it back. Lena looked at her friend, at the concern in her eyes, at the love that had survived 15 years and 2 terrible marriages and everything life had thrown at them. He took everything from me. My son, my marriage, my name. She squeezed Meg's hand. I am taking it back. She crossed the restaurant, each step steady, each breath controlled. The other patrons blurred into background noise. The music faded. The only thing that existed was the table by the window and the woman sitting there laughing at something on her phone. Sloane looked up as Lena approached. Her smile froze. Her face went pale beneath her perfect makeup. Lena, what are you doing here? Lena did not sit down. She stood over the table, looking directly into the eyes of the woman who had been sleeping with her husband while her son died. My son passed away Monday night. The words fell like stones into still water. Sloane's co-workers exchanged horrified glances. The laughter died instantly. Did Brad tell you? Sloane swallowed visibly. Yes, I am so sorry for your loss. The words sounded rehearsed, empty. The kind of thing you say when you feel nothing but know you should feel something. Were you sorry when you silenced Brad's phone? Sloane's mouth opened, then closed. No words came out. Lena continued, her voice calm and clear. The voice of a lawyer presenting evidence to a jury. Were you sorry when you told him I could wait? When you set his phone face down so he would not hear me calling while our son stopped breathing? Sloane's coworkers were staring at her now, the betrayal written on their faces as they began to understand exactly who their friend really was. I do not know what you are talking about, Sloane whispered. Suite 1904, December 14th. Lena placed her phone on the table between them. The recording app was open. The red light was blinking. I have the hotel records. I have Brad's text messages. I have security camera footage of you walking into that suite at 8 p.m. and not leaving until 6 a.m. Sloane's eyes darted to her coworkers. They were already leaning away from her, already calculating distance, already rehearsing the story they would tell on Monday. But Lena was not finished. Tell me about the accounts, Sloane. The ones in my name. Brad told you about them. He tells you everything. Sloane's face crumbled, the perfect mask finally cracking. You do not understand, she whispered. He said you knew. He said it was a tax strategy you both agreed to. He lied. Lena's voice was ice. He forged my signature. And you helped him file documents with the SEC. That is your job. You are his executive assistant. You processed the paperwork. You made the calls. You arranged the transfers. I just did what he told me. Sloane's voice broke. Tears were streaming down her face now, ruining makeup that probably cost $100 to apply. I did not know it was illegal. I swear, he said it was normal business stuff. Lena stopped the recording. Thank you, Sloane. That is all I needed. She picked up her phone, slipped it back into her pocket. Sloane looked up at her with something like desperation. What are you going to do? Lena considered the question, considered all the things she could do, all the ways she could destroy this woman who had helped destroy her life. But that was not the point. Sloane was not the enemy. She was a tool, a weapon Brad had used and would discard the moment she became inconvenient. I am going to send this recording to my lawyer, and then I am going to let the FBI decide what happens to you. She turned to leave, then paused, looked back over her shoulder. By the way, Brad called me this morning, asked if we could work things out. She let the words sink in. He said you were just stress relief, a way to blow off steam. Nothing serious. Sloane made a sound like a wounded animal. He also said you were getting clingy, that he was thinking about transferring you to another department, or maybe just letting you go. Lena watched the realization dawn on Sloane's face, the understanding that she had sacrificed her integrity, her friendships, and potentially her freedom for a man who saw her as disposable. That is the thing about men like Brad. Lena's voice was almost gentle now. They use people up and throw them away. I was his wife for 8 years, and he would have let me rot in prison to save himself. What makes you think he would treat you any better? She walked out without looking back. Meg was waiting by the door. They stepped into the cold night air together. The city glittered around them, beautiful and indifferent to the drama playing out in its midst. That, Meg said quietly, was the most savage thing I have ever witnessed. Lena's hands were shaking. The adrenaline was catching up with her. But her voice was steady. It is just the beginning. 3 days later, Lena stood in Grant's office surrounded by evidence. The room was large, lined with mahogany bookshelves and the kind of expensive leather furniture that suggested both wealth and power. Grant's security company occupied the top floor of a building in downtown Manhattan. The view from his windows showed the city sprawling in every direction. The same city where Lena had fallen in love, gotten married, become a mother, and lost everything. Now it was the city where she would rebuild. The evidence was spread across a massive conference table. Sloane's recorded confession, transcribed and annotated. Financial documents proving Brad had forged Lena's signature 23 times. Bank records showing $2.3 million moved through offshore shell companies. Photographs, emails, text messages, all the ammunition she would need. Patricia Wells, the forensic accountant Grant had hired, sat at one end of the table making notes in the margins of a particularly damning spreadsheet. She was a small woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, the kind of person who saw patterns where others saw chaos. "This is airtight," Patricia said without looking up. "Your husband thought he was clever, but he made mistakes. Timestamps that do not match. Signatures that were clearly produced by the same pen stroke pattern. Digital footprints he forgot to erase." She finally looked at Lena. "The FBI will want this, all of it." Brad had been served with divorce papers that morning. Lena had arranged for the process server to find him at his office, in the middle of a meeting with important clients. Let him explain that to his colleagues. Let him experience a fraction of the public humiliation he had been willing to let her endure. He called Lena at noon. His voice was panicked in a way she had never heard before. "Lena, please, we can work this out. I will give you whatever you want. The apartment, alimony, everything. Just do not go public with this." She let the silence stretch. "Let him sweat. I want a full admission of guilt," she finally said. "In writing, notarized, you confess to forging my signatures, to the money laundering, to all of it. You clear my name completely." "I cannot do that." Brad's panic shifted to desperation. "I will go to prison." "Yes," Lena's voice was ice. "You will. The only question is whether you go as someone who cooperated or someone who fought and lost." "If I go down, you go down with me," Brad threatened. "I will tell everyone you were part of it, that you knew everything. You can try." Lena smiled into the phone. "But I have recordings of your assistant admitting you lied to her. I have forensic evidence proving the signatures are forgeries. I have bank records showing transfers made while I was literally sitting in a hospital room with our dying son." She let that sink in. "Who do you think a jury is going to believe, Brad? The grieving mother who lost her child? Or the man who was sleeping with his secretary while his son's heart stopped?" The silence on the other end was beautiful. "Fine," Brad finally said. His voice was broken. Defeated. "You win. I will sign whatever you want." When she hung up, Meg screamed with joy. Actually screamed, loud enough to startle Patricia and make Grant spill his coffee. "You did it. You actually did it." That night they celebrated, the first celebration since Ethan died, and it felt strange to feel anything other than grief. But Lena allowed herself this moment, this one small victory before the harder work began. Grant opened a bottle of wine he had been saving for a special occasion. Meg ordered pizza from the place they used to go to in college. Patricia made her excuses and left early, but not before shaking Lena's hand and telling her she was one of the strongest women she had ever met. Even Noah Callahan, the pediatric cardiologist who had fought so hard to save Ethan, sent a text message, "Heard you are doing okay. Ethan would be proud of his mom." Lena read that message 3 times, ran her finger over the words, let herself believe, just for a moment, that her son was somewhere watching, somewhere proud. For the first time in weeks, she felt something like hope. She slept peacefully that night. No nightmares, no flatline echoing in her ears, just quiet darkness and the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who had finally stopped running. At 3 in the morning, her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, almost rolled over and went back to sleep. But something made her reach for it. Some instinct that had kept her alive through years of marriage to a man who was slowly destroying her. Unknown number, unknown sender. The message contained a single forwarded email chain between Brad and his accountant, dated 8 months ago. Lena read it once. Her heart stopped. She read it again. Then a third time as her blood turned to ice. "We need to cut costs. The kids' medical bills are eating into the investment capital. We cannot justify the expense much longer." The accountant's response, "What do you suggest?" Brad's reply, "Move 50,000 from the medical fund to the Cayman account. She will not notice. She thinks insurance covers everything. Besides, the doctors say the treatment probably will not work anyway. Why waste money on a lost cause?" Lena dropped the phone. The medical fund, the experimental treatment, the one that could have saved Ethan's life, the one the doctors had recommended 6 months ago, saying it had a 70% success rate, the one that cost $200,000 and was not covered by insurance, the one Brad had said they could not afford, no matter how hard Lena begged. Brad had the money. He had always had the money. He had moved it to offshore accounts instead. Her son died because Brad chose money over medicine. The scream that tore out of Lena was not human. It was primal, animal. The sound of a mother whose child had been murdered by the man who was supposed to protect them both. She threw her phone across the room, swept everything off the coffee table, collapsed onto the floor surrounded by shattered glass and scattered papers. Her son could have lived. Her son could have lived. And Brad had let him die. Meg found her 20 minutes later, let herself in with the emergency key and followed the sounds of screaming. Grant arrived shortly after, looking like he had not slept, looking like he was ready to commit murder with his bare hands. When he read the email, his face went white, then red, then something beyond color entirely. "I am going to kill him," Grant said quietly, calmly, like he was discussing the weather. "No." Lena's voice stopped him cold. She was sitting on the floor, tears streaming down her face, hair wild, eyes swollen, but her voice was clear, focused, terrifying. "No, this does not get to be quick. He does not get to be a victim of violence. He gets to lose everything. Slowly, publicly. I want him to watch his whole world collapse, and I want him to know I am the one who did it." Meg knelt beside her. "What are you going to do?" "I am going to destroy his reputation first," Lena said. "Then his finances. Then his freedom. In that order." She looked up at her father, the man who had taught her to fight, the man who had waited 5 years for her to realize she needed him. "And I am going to make sure he never hurts anyone else again." Grant stared at his daughter. For the first time in his life, he looked almost afraid of her. Lena built her case like a soldier building a fortress. Every document organized, every timeline verified, every lie documented and cross-referenced with proof. She worked 16-hour days, fueled by coffee and grief, and a rage that burned so hot it kept her warm through the coldest December on record. Grant connected her with a forensic accountant named Patricia Wells, a woman who had spent 20 years untangling financial crimes for federal prosecutors, a woman whose testimony had put CEOs and congressmen behind bars. Patricia reviewed everything and confirmed what Lena already knew. "This is airtight. The FBI has been investigating Morrison Financial Group for months, but they could never get inside. Your evidence gives them everything they need." Lena submitted the evidence through official channels. 2 days later, an agent named Jennifer Morrison, no relation to her soon-to-be ex-husband, called her back. "Mrs. Morrison, this is extraordinary work. Some of the most comprehensive documentation I have ever seen from a civilian source. Thank you. I want you to know that we are treating this as a priority case. Your husband is going to be arrested." The words hit Lena like a wave. After everything, after all the fighting and crying and sleepless nights, it was actually happening. Justice was coming. That night, Grant took Lena to dinner for the first time in 5 years. A quiet restaurant in Brooklyn where the waiters knew when to disappear and the wine list was better than the lighting. "You did this," Grant said, raising his glass. "Not me. I gave you tools, but you built the case. I had a good teacher." Lena clinked her glass against his, took a sip of wine that tasted like possibility. She even laughed, genuinely laughed, the first time since Ethan died. "We should do this more often," Grant said. "Father-daughter dinners, make up for lost time. I would like that." They talked about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, Grant's years in military intelligence, Lena's dreams of returning to law, the futures stretching ahead of them, full of uncertainty but also hope. By the time dinner ended, Lena felt lighter than she had in years. The feeling lasted exactly 6 hours. At midnight, a knock came at her door. 2 men in expensive suits, professional smiles that did not reach their eyes. The kind of men who made a living delivering bad news to people who could not afford to fight back. "Mrs. Morrison. We are attorneys from Morrison and Associates, Brad's family law firm. We are here to inform you that the Morrison Family Trust is filing a countersuit." The lead attorney handed her a thick envelope. His smile never wavered. "We have evidence that you orchestrated the financial crimes, that you used your husband as a patsy, that you manipulated your dying child's medical fund for personal gain." Lena felt the floor drop beneath her feet. "That is insane. That is provably false." The attorney shrugged as if her protests were slightly boring. "We also have testimony from hospital staff that you refused certain treatments for Ethan, that you were negligent in his care." He paused. "That you may have contributed to his death." The words hit her like a physical blow. Refused treatment? Negligent? She had given everything for her son, every penny, every minute, every ounce of energy she possessed. And now they were painting her as the villain. The attorneys turned to leave. The lead one paused at the door. Our client is prepared to make this very ugly, Mrs. Morrison. Very public. He smiled that cold smile again. Think carefully about whether you want your son's name dragged through a custody dispute over his medical care. Posthumously. The door closed behind them. Lena stood frozen in her hallway. The envelope felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Brad's family was wealthy, connected. They had politicians on speed dial and judges at their country club. They had more lawyers than Lena had friends, and they were willing to lie about her dead son to protect their criminal son. The FBI agent called the next morning. Agent Morrison's voice was apologetic but firm. Mrs. Morrison, I am sorry, the investigation is on hold pending the new allegations. We need to investigate the claims before we can proceed. But they are lying. All of it is fabricated. I believe you. But we have to follow procedure. It could take months to sort through everything. Months. The word echoed in Lena's head as she hung up the phone. Months of Brad walking free. Months of his family spinning lies. Months of her son's memory being dragged through the mud. Meg found her 3 hours later, sitting on the floor surrounded by photographs of Ethan. Pictures from his first birthday, first steps, first day of preschool, every milestone documented, every moment preserved, and none of it mattered because he was gone, and the people who killed him were trying to blame her for it. I cannot do this, Lena whispered. They have money and lawyers and power. I have nothing. Meg sat down beside her, put an arm around her shoulders. You have the truth. The truth does not win against billionaires. They sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, the city continued its endless noise. Cars honking, people shouting, life going on as if nothing had changed. Then Meg spoke again. Okay, hear me out. What if we burn down their law office? Lena laughed despite herself. A broken, exhausted sound. That is arson. I know, but think about how satisfying it would be. She paused. We could make it look like an electrical fire. Tempting, but orange is not my color. The joke was weak, but it was something, a tiny crack of light in complete darkness. Sometimes that is all you need. Grant arrived the next morning with coffee and new information. He looked like he had not slept, which meant he had spent the night working sources and calling in favors. The advantages of 30 years in intelligence never quite went away. Brad's family did not come up with this counter-strategy alone. Grant set a folder on the kitchen table. Someone fed them the narrative. Someone who knew exactly what evidence you had. Someone who knew your plans. Lena looked up. Her eyes were red from crying, but they were sharp with understanding. Sloan. Grant nodded. She went to them after your confrontation at the wine bar. Traded information for protection. Told them everything you said, everything you threatened. The betrayal stung, even though Lena knew she should have expected it. Sloan had already proven she had no loyalty. Why would she be loyal to the woman whose life she had helped destroy? But it also clarified something. They think they have silenced me. Lena's voice was quiet, thoughtful. They think I will back down to protect myself, to protect Ethan's memory. Grant watched her carefully. Will you? Lena stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the city that had witnessed her worst moments. No. They made one mistake. What is that? They underestimated a grieving mother. She turned back to her father. The morning light caught her face, illuminating the exhaustion and the grief and something else underneath. Something that looked like fire. When powerful people come after you, they expect you to fight on their terms. Lawyers, courtrooms, procedures, they control. Grant's eyes narrowed. Go on, but there is another court, one they cannot buy, one they cannot manipulate, one where the jury is everyone with an internet connection. Public opinion? Exactly. Lena's voice grew stronger. The one thing wealthy families fear more than prison is embarrassment. Bad press. Their name in headlines, their reputation shredded. She picked up her phone. So I am going to stop playing defense. I am going to take this story to the people. Meg had a friend, a journalist named Rachel Bennett, who worked for one of the largest news outlets in the country. Rachel had been investigating financial crimes among New York's elite families for years. She had sources everywhere and a reputation for never backing down from powerful enemies. Lena called her that afternoon. "I have a story for you," Lena said. "A billionaire family covering up their son's crimes. A dying child, stolen medical funds, and a grieving mother they are trying to silence." Rachel was very interested. Over the next week, Lena compiled everything into a single devastating narrative. She did not just focus on Brad. She exposed the entire Morrison family's pattern of corruption, old lawsuits that had been quietly settled, business partners who had disappeared after disagreements, politicians who had received suspicious donations, a trail of victims stretching back decades. The night before the article was scheduled to publish, Lena sat alone in her apartment. The city glittered outside her window, beautiful and indifferent. Somewhere out there, Brad was probably at a fancy restaurant, confident that his family's lawyers would protect him. Somewhere out there, Sloane was probably drinking expensive wine, convinced she had saved herself by betraying someone else. They had no idea what was coming. Lena picked up Ethan's stuffed elephant, held it against her chest, closed her eyes. "I know you cannot hear me, baby, but I want you to know something." Her voice broke. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Mommy is fighting. Mommy is not giving up. And the people who hurt us, they are going to answer for what they did." She opened her eyes, looked at the photograph of Ethan on the mantel, his bright smile, his dancing eyes, the curl of hair that always fell across his forehead, no matter how many times she brushed it back. "I will make them pay," she promised. "For you, for us, for every mother who has ever been told to be quiet and stay small and accept injustice because fighting back is too hard." The apartment was silent, but somewhere Lena felt certain her son was listening. And tomorrow, the world would listen too. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning. Morrison heir accused of stealing from dying son's medical fund. The headline screamed across every news website in America. Within an hour, it was trending on every social media platform. Within 3 hours, cable news networks were running continuous coverage. Rachel Bennett had done extraordinary work. She had verified every claim, corroborated every document, and woven Lena's story into a narrative that was impossible to ignore. A grieving mother, a dying child, a husband who chose money over medicine, a powerful family trying to silence the truth. It was the kind of story that America could not look away from. By noon, the article had been shared over 50,000 times. Comment sections overflowed with rage. Hashtags emerged and began trending. "Stand with Lena," "Justice for Ethan," "Morrison family exposed." Brad's professional profiles were flooded with angry messages. His LinkedIn connections started disappearing as colleagues rushed to distance themselves. His Instagram account, Uttercam, filled with pictures of expensive vacations and business dinners, was bombarded with comments calling him a monster. His father's company stock dropped 18% by market close. That was catastrophe number one. Catastrophe number two came 3 days later. Rachel Bennett had not stopped with the article. She had followed up, dug deeper, found more sources, including Sloane Whitmore. Abandoned by the Morrison family's promises of protection, facing her own prosecution, and desperate to save herself, Sloane agreed to a full interview. She sat in front of cameras with mascara running down her cheeks. The perfect hair was less perfect now. The designer clothes had been replaced by something simpler. The confidence was gone, replaced by the trembling of a woman who had finally realized she was disposable. "Brad told me Ethan was going to die anyway." Her voice cracked. "He said the money was better used building our future. He said Lena was obsessed, that she was wasting resources on a lost cause." The interviewer leaned forward. "Did you believe him?" Sloane wiped her eyes. "I wanted to believe him. I loved him." She laughed bitterly. "Or I thought I did. He made me believe that Lena was the problem, that she was holding him back, that once the kid was gone, everything would be better." The interview went viral within hours. Social media exploded. The comments under Sloane's interview were savage. The mistress who helped kill a child. The other woman who silenced a mother's desperate calls. Sloane's career was over. Her reputation was destroyed. Her face was everywhere, associated forever with betrayal and death. She had traded her integrity for a man who saw her as stress relief. Now the whole world knew. Catastrophe number 3 came from an unexpected source, Dr. Noah Callahan. He had been Ethan's pediatric cardiologist for 2 years. He had seen every treatment, every setback, every moment of hope that gave way to despair. He had held Lena's hand during the worst nights and fought alongside her for every additional day of Ethan's life. And he had records, detailed medical records that proved exactly what Lena had done for her son and exactly what Brad had failed to do. Rachel Bennett interviewed him in his office at the hospital. He wore his white coat and his serious expression and spoke with the authority of someone who had dedicated his life to saving children. As Ethan's physician, Noah told the cameras, "I can confirm that Mrs. Morrison did everything humanly possible to save her son. She was at every appointment. She learned more about his condition than most medical students. She advocated for him constantly, sometimes to the point of exhausting herself." He paused. "Let the words sink in. The experimental treatment we recommended had a 70% success rate. It was Ethan's best chance. Mrs. Morrison begged for it. She asked about payment plans, fundraising, anything. She was told by her husband that they could not afford it." Another pause. "Now I know why. The money existed. It was moved to offshore accounts 3 weeks before we made our recommendation. Mr. Morrison chose money over his son's life, and Mrs. Morrison had no idea." The hospital released a formal statement supporting Noah's account. Brad Morrison was arrested 2 days later, on camera at JFK Airport, trying to board a private plane to the Cayman Islands. The footage showed him being led through the terminal in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. Passengers stopped to stare. Some took out their phones to record. Some shouted insults that the news networks had to bleep. His face was on every news channel in America. The Morrison family released a statement that same afternoon. "Bradley Morrison's actions do not represent our family's values. We are cooperating fully with investigators. We have chosen to distance ourselves from Bradley and his personal matters. They had disowned him to save themselves." Lena watched the news footage in her apartment. Meg sat beside her on the couch. Grant stood by the window, his face reflecting the flickering television light. Brad's face filled the screen, handcuffed, bewildered, finally facing consequences for the first time in his privileged life. Lena waited to feel something: triumph, satisfaction, joy. She felt nothing, just emptiness where her rage used to be, just grief that would never fully heal, just the quiet knowledge that justice, however complete, could never bring her son back. Meg squeezed her hand. "You did it, babe." "No." Lena shook her head slowly. "Ethan did it. I just finished what he started the night he opened my eyes." She looked at the photograph of her son on the mantel. "This is for you, baby. This is all for you." The trial lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of testimony and evidence and legal arguments that filled courtrooms and newspaper columns and endless hours of television coverage. 3 weeks of Lena sitting in the gallery, watching the man she had married try to talk his way out of consequences he had earned. She testified on the 4th day. She wore a simple black dress. Her hair was pulled back. She carried no notes. She did not need them. Every word of this story was written on her heart. The prosecutor's questions were straightforward. "Mrs. Morrison, can you describe your son's medical condition?" "Ethan was born with a congenital heart defect. He needed multiple surgeries. The doctors always said there was hope, that with proper treatment, he could live a normal life." "And was proper treatment provided?" "For a while, but it became harder to afford. My husband controlled our finances. He told me insurance covered less than it actually did. He told me we had no savings when we actually had millions." "Did you know about the offshore accounts?" "No, I trusted my husband completely. I signed documents he put in front of me because I was exhausted from hospital visits, and he told me it was routine financial paperwork." "When did you learn the truth?" "After Ethan died. An anonymous source sent me emails proving my husband had moved money from our son's medical fund to offshore accounts, money that could have paid for the experimental treatment that might have saved his life." Her voice cracked. She took a breath, continued. "My son died because his father chose money over medicine, and I had no idea until it was too late." The prosecutor nodded. "Mrs. Morrison, why did you not come forward sooner?" Lena met Brad's eyes across the courtroom. He looked away. "Because I blame myself. I thought I should have noticed the missing money. I thought I should have pushed harder for treatment. I spent months believing I failed my son. She paused. Let the silence stretch. Then I realized the only person who failed Ethan sir was the man who was supposed to protect him. Brad's attorney tried to paint her as vindictive during cross-examination, as a scorned wife seeking revenge against a husband who had strayed. Is it not true, the attorney asked, that you wanted to destroy my client because he was unfaithful? Lena met his eyes without flinching. No, I wanted justice because my husband let our son die to protect his money. The affair was just the door I walked through to find the truth. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on 47 counts. The verdict echoed through the courtroom. Lena did not cry, did not smile, just closed her eyes and felt something shift inside her. Justice, imperfect, incomplete, insufficient justice, but justice nonetheless. Sentencing came 2 weeks later, 25 years in federal prison. As guards prepared to lead Brad from the courtroom, he looked at Lena one final time. You ruined me, he said. His voice was hollow, broken. No, Lena's voice carried across the silent room. You ruined yourself. I just made sure everyone knew. She stood up, walked out of the courtroom, did not look back. 6 months later, spring came to Brooklyn. The kind of spring that felt like a promise. Warm sunshine, flowers blooming in window boxes, children playing in parks, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Lena stood in a small garden dedicated in Ethan's memory. Grant had funded its creation. A quiet corner of Prospect Park, filled with the flowers and butterflies that Ethan had loved. A small stone marker bore his name. Ethan James Morrison, beloved son, forever loved. Grant stood nearby, giving her space. He had learned over these months when she needed company and when she needed solitude. He was getting better at reading her silences. I am proud of you, sweetheart. Your mother would be, too. Lena touched the stone, traced her son's name with her fingertips. I did it, baby. Mommy fought for you every single day, and I won. Not because I am strong, but because loving you made me brave. Meg arrived with flowers, fresh tulips, Ethan's favorite, and so. What is next? Lena smiled. The first real smile in almost a year, a smile that felt earned. I am going back to law school, going to specialize in cases like mine. Women whose husbands use financial abuse to control them. Families who lose children because someone chose money over medicine. Meg's eyes filled with tears. Look at you, turning pain into purpose. Someone has to. Lena took her friend's hand, and maybe by helping other people, I can give Ethan's death some meaning. Maybe his story can save someone else's child. They stood together in comfortable silence. Two women who had been through everything together. Sisters in everything but blood. A few minutes later, footsteps approached on the gravel path. Noah Callahan stood a respectful distance away. He held something in his hands. They had stayed in touch over the months. Not romantic, not yet, but something deeper. The understanding of two people who had seen the worst of humanity and chosen to believe in the best anyway. I was hoping I would find you here, Noah said. I brought something. He handed Lena a framed photograph. Ethan at one of his appointments, laughing at something Noah had said, his eyes bright, his smile wide, his whole face alive with joy. Lena's breath caught in her throat. I have never seen this one. He was talking about how his mom was the bravest person he knew. Noah's voice was soft. He said you fought monsters for him, and he said you never gave up, even when things were really scary. Lena traced her son's smile through the glass. I promised him I would tell you someday, Noah continued. So here I am, keeping my promise. Lena looked at the photograph, then at Noah, then at the garden where her son's memory would live forever. She thought about everything she had lost, everything she had fought for, everything she had become, and she made a decision. Do you want to get coffee sometime? Noah smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him since Ethan's funeral. Coffee sounds perfect. 1 year later, Lena opened her own law practice, a small office in Brooklyn. Nothing fancy, just a desk, some chairs, and a mission statement painted on the wall. Justice for families, hope for tomorrow. Her first client was a woman named Sarah, whose husband had emptied their savings while she cared for their sick parent. who had signed documents she did not understand because she trusted the man who was supposed to love her. Sound familiar? Lena took her case pro bono. Sloan Whitmore received 3 years probation and 200 hours of community service. She worked as an administrative assistant at a nonprofit now, helping domestic violence survivors rebuild their lives. She was a tool, Lena had told the judge during sentencing. Brad was the weapon. She believed his lies the same way I did, the same way a lot of women do. It was not forgiveness. Not exactly. But it was something close. On the anniversary of Ethan's death, Lena held a small gathering in his garden. Grant was there, looking healthier than he had in years. The reconciliation with his daughter had given him something to live for. Meg was there, already on her second glass of wine, telling stories about Ethan that made everyone laugh through their tears. Noah was there, standing close to Lena, but not too close. They were taking things slow, building something real. And Ethan was there too, in the flowers, in the butterflies, in the laughter of children playing nearby. Lena stood by the stone marker as the sun set over the city. It took losing everything to find out what mattered. I thought my life ended the night Ethan died, but he gave me a gift that night. The courage to stop pretending, stop accepting, stop shrinking. She touched the photograph of her son that she carried everywhere now. My son's last breath gave me mine. Outside the garden, the city hummed with life. People going about their business, falling in love, making mistakes, learning, growing, surviving. Snow began to fall, soft and quiet, a gentle reminder that even after the longest nights, morning always comes. And sometimes the dawn is more beautiful than anything that came before. If this story made you feel something, if you have ever trusted someone who did not deserve it, if you believe that mothers who fight for their children deserve to win, then you are exactly where you belong. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the notification bell, because stories like this, they remind us that justice is not just a word, it is a choice. Drop a comment below. Tell me, would you have forgiven him, or would you have burned his world to the ground? Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember, locked doors are just invitations to build something better.